The use of appropriate mise-en-scène within our piece is a convention that we adhered to. Normally in music videos, the protagonist and the band members, etc., the characters basically, tend to wear clothes of, like, the codes of dress that apply to those their fans and what they wear, etc. We try to stick with this, so obviously our protagonist is needed to be of sort of an indie style. So obviously we had plain black denim jeans. We had, when you couple that with sort of the Chelsea boots, the loud print shirt and the blue bomber jacket, you tend to get this very indie sort of style vibe, which is exactly what we wanted coming off from our character. Also within our mise-en-scène, obviously our locations were pretty indie. I mean, a lot of them were isolating, especially the fields, where we used mainly sort of long shots, mid shots, sort of long close-ups as well, I guess. That made him look quite isolated throughout the entire piece. Also, obviously, with our room where all the smashing takes place, it's a ragstone room. It's very sort of indie looking, and I mean, that coupled with the isolation sort of spaces are quite typical of indie music videos. The other part of mise-en-scène really we've got is our props. Obviously we had to be a bit careful with the smashing scene. Obviously we couldn't put like computers and TVs in this room and turn it into like a proper room, because obviously, if he's smashing glasses, then people are going to be like, well, why isn't he smashing the computer? Surely that's of more wealth. And so obviously we were a bit limited with what we could sort of go with, but I think, having the ashtray, the glasses, the plates, the vodka and the tequila bottles, it kind of gave that idea of more almost like a social sort of place, somewhere that, he would entertain friends possibly, but also something that connects with quite young people as well. So obviously we're showing his age in this as well, which is always a good thing. So really I think we pretty much adhere to these sort of conventions of like within the mise-en-scène of indie music videos. Within our piece, I mean, there is the idea of the minimalistic and bleak sort of surroundings and sort of tone and theme throughout our entire piece. I mean, this is very, very conventional of the indie style, especially with the more somber type songs like the Mystery Jets do. We sort of went for the whole bleakness, especially within the fields. I mean, we were quite lucky to start with that we had quite an overcast day to shoot, and actually also in the balcony. I mean, it was very overcast, it almost started raining on us. But I mean, in post-production we added a greyish sort of tint, we turned down the hue a bit, so it just looked that little bit more washed out, that little bit more bleak. Because we just sort of decided, the bleakness kind of went with the sombre tone of everything we were trying to portray. And, it's a bit of almost pathetic fallacy, I guess, if you want. The minimalism, again, kind of comes within in the props, which I spoke about a minute ago, and just the lack of other things that are in our piece. Everything is just him, and then the occasional shots of him and his girlfriend. It's all very much one point of view, all very much sort of one sort of view, point of view. So it is very minimal. You don't seem to get to know a lot, and I mean, especially within, the relationship, okay, you see that it's a happy relationship, but all you ever really see is them walking around or them sitting on a bench and laughing. We don't properly get an insight into anyone's life within it, but I think the narrative is strong, but it is minimal, but I think it works. I think, for a music video, you can't have an amazingly complex and in-depth narrative, but I think we've achieved that quite well, and again adhered to those conventions. The idea of integrated performance within our piece. It is a convention out there. I mean, it's very conventional to have performance and narrative. There are a lot of music videos that have very, very just strong narrative pieces. There are some that have complete and total performance for their whole song. But it's becoming more and more common to combine the two. normally having them separate, but especially within like the indie sort of genre, it is becoming more and more popular to sort of have integrated performance into your narrative. Really, I think we did this quite well. I think it was a success, and I think it was the best way for us to go. I mean, from the very, very outset, we wanted really a strong narrative. If we had our way, there'd be no performance. So this was a way for us to sort of tick the performance box and still have a really, really strong focus on a narrative. And in retrospect, I think we made the best decision by using the miming within our narrative, because I think if we had cutaways to a bad performance, like the emotion and the reason and the linear structure would get lost, and I don't think it'd be as sort of dramatic and powerful as it is, especially, you know, because like the audience is going to lose the connection with the emotions, and as to be honest, I don't think they'd get a strong connection with the emotions, because I think a lot of our connection between protagonist and audience is when we have eye level shots of him miming into the camera, so it's almost like a direct address to the audience. You know, him proclaiming, these are my feelings, this is what I'm feeling, this song is how I'm feeling right now, you know. So I think we made the best choice on that, and I mean, yeah, it is a pretty strong convention in a music video, so I think we have adhered to that, especially, I mean, it is coming more and more popular in the indie sort of music scene. The idea of slow motion, well, the effect of slow motion has been used in music videos, and it is commonly seen in music videos. I mean, Run Boy Run and Iron by Woodkid being fantastic examples. Really though, I don't think I've ever really seen it used to the extent that we did, or the way that we did. Normally when you see it in real media text, you see it as sort of an emphasis of movement, or, you know, a moment where people really need to sort of pay attention, or just generally for aesthetic beauty of like shots. We guess in a way we did kind of use it for like the emphasis of movement, especially from the real time to slow motion in the sweeping and the throwing. But I think really we used it to emphasize emotion, which is where I think we developed this sort of convention. It's sort of, I guess we sort of use it to develop the emotion, to demonstrate the pure turmoil, and to add like this dramatic effect to it, so the audience really, really take note of what is going on, and, you know, can really understand the amount that this is putting this guy through. And especially the running shots, I think, you know, that is a point where the audience can see he's trying to run away from his past life, he's trying to break free, and by slowing that all down, you kind of see the effect it's truly having on him. I think if you just had him running across some fields, it looked quite strange, but especially coupled with the overlay effect of his girlfriend, I think altogether that just adds so much drama and so much sort of impact to our shots. I think, you know, I don't think our piece would be nearly as successful without this slow motion effect. The overlay effect, I guess, is something that is used in music videos. I mean, it is coming a bit more popular. It is almost, you could say, becoming a bit of a convention. Normally, though, it's used as more of a transitional shot, especially within performance sections of the piece. Like, where you may have the singer in one corner and then another version of her comes on the other side and they're singing, and then this one will disappear. You know, it's more of a transitional shot. We used it really, and I think this is where we develop it. We actually used it to make a dramatic impact. You know, we didn't just use it as transitional shots. The two places we used it is when we overlay the girl running, and where the girl walks into the fire with the letter. And people have said that that letter shot is one of our strongest shots in our whole piece, and personally, I agree with them. It is my favourite shot. And I think, you know, by using it in those ways and using it to emphasise the emotions, the memories, and having that more personal connection with the effect, it allows the audience to really understand, like, you know, the turmoil that's going on in his head. Because obviously in one part of him going, yeah, but I love my possessions and my money, etc. But the other part, which is the part that you mainly get to see, is the fact that, like, this girl is constantly on his mind. And I think this overlaying allows the audience to see that he's not just this guy that cares for more money and didn't really care for the girlfriend. It's the fact that she's always on his mind, you know, that's what we've tried to portray through that and the flashbacks. You know, it's that he is genuinely a good guy, really, and you kind of understand and you feel a bit more sympathy for him because you kind of feel sorry for him. I mean, I know that sounds silly, but you feel more empathy for him because he is actually a nice guy rather than just this guy that didn't care. So I think really for us the overlay effect was really, really important. I mean, it's something we never really planned. It just sort of came about when we were in post-production. There was a couple of points where we're like, right, this needs to be more interesting, and then we came up with these ideas and we played around with it and it just happened to look really good. But, you know, it worked well for us. I mean, it is current in music videos, so it's not like it's completely out of place. It's not like we're challenging it, but I definitely think we've moved on from just the conventional way that it's used. The flashbacks are something I think we've developed. I mean, the convention that we've developed here is the idea of a non-linear sort of editing structure, which is really apparent and really sort of conventional in music videos. But instead of like having like clips of things juxtaposed next to each other that don't really make much sense, we've sort of used it in the fact to almost show you highlights of his life, highlights of his life, highlights of the relationship, going almost into his mind and using and displaying memories rather than displaying things that don't actually make any sense to our narrative. And I think by this we've actually used this non-linear sort of editing style. I mean, yes, it can be argued that we have a very linear editing style throughout the rest of the piece, but I think as soon as we started adding in these flashbacks, it became very disjointed at points, especially where we overlaid shots, and obviously especially with the flashbacks put in as sort of cutaways, became a lot less linear and a lot more non-linear. But I mean, that's pretty obvious. If it's not linear, it's going to be probably non-linear. However, I think the flashbacks, I mean, they were a late addition to our thing. I mean, they were never in the original plan, but I think without them, our piece would nowhere near be as successful as it was. Like, you know, it just allows the audience, as I've said for the overlay effect, it allows the audience to have that connection with our character and it just emphasises the fact that, you know, there was a happy relationship there. There was a lot of time, you know, there was a lot of good times there. And, like, you really get to understand why the sort of like the problem, the turmoil in his head is sort of apparent, and you know, and why it's there, because he had such a good relationship, and it just seems really sort of bizarre that she's upped and left him, you know. The audience feel a lot more empathy for him because there's no clear, obvious reason, like, you know, he wasn't mean to her in the relationship and this, that and the other. It's just purely because of the money, and almost in a way he's sort of portrayed as like this villain and a hero in one, and I think, you know, that just sort of allows the audience to have a lot more connection with him. And so, you know, I think our flashbacks, they are sort of a development of the convention of music videos, but I think, you know, they really allow the connection between the audience and the you know, the protagonist to really develop and really become, you know, a strong connection. Obviously our narrative does have like the underlying idea of the cliche boy and girl breakup sort of narrative. You know, the sort of romantic narrative, and I mean that is very, very conventional to the indie sort of music videos. However, I think we've developed this. I mean, we've made it into something a bit more, and instead of just seeing him being mopey and sad and her going off with someone else, we've actually sort of created this sort of tale of self-discovery within the guy, you know, and like the actual physical change. I mean, within the middle of the running, the audience see a metaphorical and a literal turning point in this character's life. And I think by giving it those levels of depth, and obviously blaming it on sort of money and capitalism and stuff like that, and giving it those levels of depth, make it, you know, that just a little bit more interesting. So the audience can go, oh, it's just another soppy romantic thing to accompany a song. No, this one's different. This one actually has meaning behind it, which is something we wanted to do. I mean, when we were first discussing it, we were like, no, not doing boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, no. And in the end, we sort of drive back to it because it is conventional, but we kind of wanted to put our own twist on it, and we did, and it just seemed to work really, really well with the lyrics. Just lent itself very, very well to the lyrics and this idea of not being good enough for someone. And that, so I think really we couldn't really escape it, but I think we definitely tried to develop it away from just being that, you know, normal, oh, she's upset, she's running away from him, she's not doing, you know, the very, very sort of stereotypical love story in a music video. The fact that our piece has sort of a social comment is somewhere I think where we challenge the ideas of music videos. The purpose of music videos really is to advertise the band. You know, to get it on air, to get people to listen to the song, see the band. It's basically a massive advertisement. Leaving most of them pretty meaningless narratives. Ours, I think, is the complete opposite. We wanted to make something that meant something. We wanted a really, really strong narrative, both of which I think we achieved, and I think this is really highlighted by the fact that we have a bit of a social comment in there. We are obviously saying that she has dumped him because of, you know, the amount he allows money to control his life, and really, that's a bit of a social comment on capitalism, I think. I mean, we're not obviously going as extreme as to say, hey, let's go communist, but I think, you know, it's a bit of a social comment on saying, look, how much do you allow money to control your life? I mean, I've always said that I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to be successful when I am happy. So when I get up every single morning doing the job I want to do, when I get up every single morning having a loving family, etc, etc, that's when I'm going to feel successful, not when I wake up every single morning going, well, hey, I'm rich. That's not the idea in my life. Yes, okay, I'd like, you know, to earn decent money, but I'd rather be happy than rich. And I think, you know, that's sort of a thought that's a bit lost in our society these days. I think a lot of people think to be happy you have to have money and you have to be rich and you have to have nice things, and I don't think that's true. I think you can find happiness in non-material, like, goods. So, you know, like with the ideas of family and love and, you know, happiness, I think, you know, you can find yourself being successful there. And I think that's a bit lost. So for me, really, this was quite an important point that we put it in, and then we did have, you know, a bit of a social comment on it, because I'm hoping, you know, when our audience watch it, they're going to think, hang on a sec, do I allow my money? Could I get in this situation? Could, you know, I mean, it's not very, very explicit. We didn't really want it to be explicit, because obviously then that just turns it into a bit more of a political sort of statement rather than a music video. But I think the fact that it's there and the fact that we didn't just leave it as, oh, I found someone else from the girl, I think it's a lot, it is important, and I think it's definitely a challenge to, you know, the meaninglessness of music videos. I think another way that we've challenged conventions within our piece is the idea that we have multiple locations for one purpose. Normally when you see sort of music videos, there may be one or two locations for narrative, there may be one or two locations for performance, you know, depending on how much screen time is given to both, either. In ours we have 5 just for our narrative / performance integrated, you know. Which again, I think even for integrated narratives, that's quite a lot. I mean, we start at the balcony, then we have the sort of housing estate where he walks, and we have the fields where they run, we have the room where he smashes everything, and we have like this park style, like this park location for where we film the flashbacks of the couple. Quite frankly, this is a bit of a challenge on, you know, music videos not having this sort of idea of a really strong storyline narrative, you know, actual sort of like short film style, whereas normally, you know, you get a snippet in someone's life and then you get some performance, you know, you never actually get like that full sort of narrative structure. And I think that's something that really set our music video apart from others. I mean, normally you just see like a day in the life of someone. Okay, yes, ours does take place in a day, but I think ours is where it's a lot more emotional. We needed that more time and that many locations for him to travel, because I mean, you actually physically see him go on a journey, as well as a mental journey as well. And I think without, you know, the use of multiple locations, it wouldn't have worked. I mean, you know, when we were planning this, we weren't sitting there going, haha, we are going to challenge the convention of multiple locations. It just sort of happened because it fitted with what we wanted to do. But obviously, looking back at it in retrospect, it is a bit of a challenge on this sort of convention where, you know, music videos tend to only happen in one or two locations. So yeah, I think, you know, it is something, but I think without it, you know, it was more of a subconscious challenging of conventions, because basically, with, you know, if we had done this in two locations, our piece would have failed. You know, it just wouldn't have got the same effect. And it was just a logical thing to do at the time, and just in, you know, pure coincidence, we've managed to challenge, you know, conventions in real media text. The idea that we have like a complete narrative within our piece is, you know, it is true, like, and it is challenging real media conventions. I mean, half the time when I watch music videos, I can't even understand the correlation between the images and the song, let alone the images altogether. So I think by having a really strong narrative, it does kind of challenge, you know, the conventions of it, especially when it's a complete narrative. I mean, a lot of narratives you see in music videos tend to sort of be like, you know, snippets of people's lives, and then here's some performance to go with it, and this is, you know, portraying this. Whereas ours, you know, where we've integrated it all together, you kind of get this sense of like a whole narrative together. I mean, you can put Todorov on it, and, you know, you start with like the idea of the equilibrium, which we show through our flashbacks. You know, you can show it's a happy time, a nice time, you know, a warm time due to the colours and the tints and the editing style that we use, you know, and just the general performance of the actors. And then obviously you've got this disequilibrium when, you know, the guy sort of finds out that she's leaving him, and it's all sad with the letter, etc., etc. And then you've got the point of chaos where really for us it's sort of the smashing and you know, and really sort of the turmoil of emotion. And then you have the idea of the new equilibrium. And I guess we don't show this explicitly, I mean, because our ending is quite ambiguous, but I think the fact of having an ambiguous ending, the audience then get to choose how they want it to end. You know, if you're more of an optimist, you're going to say they got back together. If you're more of a pessimist, you're not. You know, we've used sort of lighting techniques, etc., etc., that we have done for flashbacks, and then we've made it look a bit more normalised near the end, and so we have left it quite ambiguous. And we have had some like interesting points on how people thought, you know, it could be pretty different, how it could end. But I think, you know, the idea that we kind of have that whole narrative in a music video, it kind of takes away from the idea that music videos are this advertising form, and, you know, actually turned it into more of a narrative-based piece, you know, more of a short film, you know, that accompanies, you know, a song, rather than, you know, here's the video that promotes our band and our song. So we've kind of come at it from that angle, which I think, you know, is quite a challenging way to look at a music video. So yeah, you know, this concept of having a complete narrative and a really, really strong narrative-based piece is a challenge. The inclusion of like lyrics within our digipack is a very, very simple convention to adhere to with digipacks. I mean, there are digipacks that don't include them and just have sort of pictures or pictures of the band, and personally, from a personal point of view, I find that very, very irritating, because I quite like to look at it, to read the lyrics, make sure that when I'm singing along I know that I'm singing it right. Okay, so yeah, I guess like we have been very, very sort of conventional with our ancillaries, and like, but I think really for ancillaries you kind of have to be that little bit more conventional, because I think if you aren't, you are at risk of alienating your audience, because obviously these are the like the advertising and the sellable goods. So if you make them too outlandish, people are going to almost be intimidated by your product and not want to buy it. So just just doing simple things like including the lyrics within our digipack is a very, very simple convention to adhere to, but it's really, really effective. Having a really simple layout across both our ancillary products was something that again, it's about appealing to your audience. Obviously, by having the simple style, by having the monochrome, and then just having, like a picture of our front cover on the poster. I mean, its idea is to advertise and give information, and I think if you overcrowd it, people aren't going to bother to read it to find the information. If you literally give them a picture, who it is, what it's doing, when it's out, here's a review. It's very, very simple, very, very easy information to digest, and I think it's very, very, it's just a lot easier and a lot more accessible to a lot more people if it's not quite as, bold and outlandish, by keeping it that more simple style, a little bit, quite a bit of negative space, etc., etc. It doesn't sort of alienate anyone really. There's nothing there to go, oh, that's too far out for me. If we'd done it in sort of black backgrounds with lots of pictures of bands and fire and skulls or whatever, that would have been A, very apt character for the type of music we're doing, but B, that's more for like heavy metal music, and you're gonna be alienating your target audience and possibly alienating a lot of other people. So by keeping it very, very neutral, very, very simple, we sort of decided that A, it fits with sort of the indie style, and it fits with sort of the bleakness of our main product, but it also, it doesn't alienate anyone. And I mean, the same as in our digipack. I mean, it's literally a picture of an atmospheric sky with black writing, and then inside it's a black page, white writing, and a picture. I mean, yes, the pictures are a little bit more interesting, but overall it's a very simple layout, it's a very simple style, and I personally think it allows our audience to access the information they want, when they want, very easily, and without sort of, pushing anyone away, without alienating anyone out of it. It's not so, out there that people are going to go, whoa, it's very, very simple, basically, is the point I'm trying to make. And that's very quite conventional, really, of the indie genre, but, that's how that goes. The use of bleak imagery, again, is something that's really, really conventional to the indie genre, as I've said in previous for our main product. I mean, we carried this over onto our ancillaries, partly, to create a bit of continuity between three products, but also because it is conventional. Obviously, the front cover is a picture of a very atmospheric sky, but I mean, the colours are literally blues, greys, whites, and a bit of black. I mean, it appears to have a lot of negative space. Etc., etc. It's a very sort of bland image and very sort of bleak outlook. There's almost like a grey wash, it looks like, has over the top of it. But that's sort of where we were going with it. And I mean, inside where the photos have been layered, I've had to change the opacity, and by doing that, you lose some of the colour and the vibrancy of some of the colours, and it just gives it that even more bleaker look, and I think that's something that sort of fits with the indie style. It's very, very conventional, and again, it doesn't alienate anyone. It's not like, scary or really iconically something. It's just very neutral style of ancillaries, and I mean, yes, it does also create the continuity from our main product. So yeah, pretty conventional. I guess the only way we really sort of develop any sort of conventions is the fact that we have a lack of band presence really in any of our products, but mainly in the ancillaries. Obviously, in our main product, our protagonist is meant to sort of be the lead in the band. But in our ancillaries, you don't see the band at all. I mean, it's very, very easy to go for the generic black and white band shots. Oh, we're in a studio. Oh, we're out here on a trip. Oh, we're on a photo shoot, you know, to create your digipack. And I mean, that's very, very, you know, that's done quite a lot in the indie sort of style. But we sort of went with the idea that, you know, it's more about the music and less about who makes the music. And I think that is another sort of idea that comes through from the indie sort of ideal, like, you know, like the indie ideas. And I think by not showing the band, it just makes it that little bit more different, because I quite know if I find a digipack boring, I just put it straight back down again and never look at it. But some of the best ones I've seen have been the ones without the pictures of the bands and without, but have sort of like interesting imagery and sort of something a bit different. And I think by overlaying our photos and the combinations of some of the overlays are that little bit interesting. And I mean, they do all have a connection to the songs next to them, and I hope that the audience appreciates that. So I think that's the only way we really sort of develop anything within our I don't really think we've challenged anything within our ancillaries. As I've said earlier, like, we stayed pretty conventional. I think ultimately this is the way that you sell your product and the way you advertise your product. And I think, as I have said, you know, if you go too far out, you will end up alienating people. I mean, yeah, it's fine to sort of develop it and make it your own, which is fair enough. But I think to a certain extent, you've got to stay pretty conventional. Because I mean, what's the point of having a band poster if, you know, you don't tell people when it's coming out, or, you know, you don't tell people who it is and this, that and the other. It just kind of defeats the object of the poster. And I think you've kind of got to, you know, you kind of got to stay with it. You know, you can't afford to do anything too much that is, you know, sort of outlandish and creative and that, because otherwise people just aren't going to take the time to look at it. I mean, some people could say that ours is a little too bland, but when you look at sort of the indie market and stuff like that, that is how they sell their stuff, that is how they market their stuff. So really, I mean, we have just stuck with the conventions, and I know it's boring, but they're practical conventions, and, you know, we haven't done it as a cop-out, we've done it because we believe that they're important to have within a piece. And that, so yeah, overall I don't think we actually challenge anything really.